For 18 months, I drove this 79 series Land Cruiser, absolutely convinced that upgrading the door seals was the single most effective modification I had made for cabin noise. I mean, after all, why would so many YouTubers swear by them? But conviction is not data, and recently I started to wonder, do they actually make a difference? And if they do work, by how much? If you read the Facebook comments about this subject, nobody agrees. Half the owners swear by these thick aftermarket door seals and say they're a game changer, and the other half basically say that they're a waste of money. So I decided to stop guessing and see if I can settle this debate once and for all using some real data and testing. I'm Eamon and welcome back to Bush Business. Today we are not doing a review, we are doing a scientific test. We will be looking through the physical differences between the aftermarket and factory door seals, how they fit on the cruiser, and most importantly, how they perform objectively using a professional sound meter and some precise measurements in a direct back-to-back test, which I will cover in considerable detail shortly. Before we look at the seals and the test data, please do give that subscribe button a click for me to show your support, as none of these videos are sponsored or paid for by anybody else other than myself. Now let's get straight to business. Before we look at the graphs, we need to look at the size and construction of the seals, as they are considerably different in size and shape. First, the factory seals. This rubber is stiffer than the aftermarket option. It's molded to the exact shape of the door pinch and fits very well following the curves of the Land Cruiser door. It measures about 12.6 millimeters deep by 16.6 millimeters wide, and when installed on the door, it sits about 13.7 millimeters deep. Now for the aftermarket door seals. The rubber is much softer, and like all aftermarket door seals, it is a generic item, meaning that it's not shaped to fit any specific car, let alone the Land Cruiser. When you look closer at that door seal, it does look like it's two parts combined into one. You have the base that sits over the pinch weld, which is 12.97 millimeters deep, but then there's an additional tube that's stuck to it, adding another 18 millimeters of depth. That brings the total depth to 27.5 millimeters, and installed it's about 26 millimeters. Therefore, there's an additional 10 millimeters of material that the door must compress every time you close it with the aftermarket door seal. And this in theory creates the extra seal to stop the wind noise from coming in the door. And that extra thickness is very noticeable when you try to close the door. The door requires much more force to close. However, does that compression actually stop the sound? To answer that, I didn't just use a phone app. I used a calibrated data logging sound meter, and I mounted it at ear level on the passenger seat to accurately represent what we will likely hear when we're driving or sitting as a passenger. And to reduce the possibility of that seat from making noise and vibration, because it is a 70 series Land Cruiser at the end of the day, I strapped that seat firmly and added some thick microfiber cloths to the sound meter clamp to dampen any vibrations. The test loop was carried out over a 20-kilometer stretch of highway at a speed of 110 kilometers an hour, which is the maximum speed limit we can drive in New South Wales. Also, to rule out any variance in the road surface, I drove the exact same stretch of road back to back on the same day, within the same hour, to avoid any changes in traffic, wind direction, weather, or tire condition. And also, I used cruise control as much as possible to rule out any potential sound from the engine. First, I tested the aftermarket seals, as they've been on my car for a while now. I've had them on the cruiser for well over 30,000 kilometers, and I'm quite accustomed to how they sound now. The data showed a stable average of 72.8 decibels, and the drive was no different to any other, just your regular wind noise that you get from driving a Land Cruiser. This was my baseline, as I ran the data logger for approximately 500 logs, or around 20 kilometers, taking a sound reading every single second. For those who are curious what 72.8 decibels is equivalent to, I found this neat chart online. So we're almost at the same sound level as a vacuum cleaner. Quite loud when you consider that we sit in these cars for hours and hours at a time on the highway. Now let's switch the camera to the cabin and see how that actually sounds like using my DJI microphone without the background sound cancellation enabled. After this, I pulled over, took the aftermarket door seals off, and put the factory ones back on. But as I started to continue that test, I encountered an unexpected curveball. Let's go have a look. This is the subjective test for the factory door seals that are now back on. And to be honest with you, they don't sound any different. If anything, they sound a little bit quieter, but I'll let the decibel meter do the judgment here, but so far on the highway there is no noticeable difference in sound level to me. We are traveling in the opposite direction, so that might have something to do with it, and if it keeps going this way, I might just do a U-turn and go back up to make sure that the test is replicated exactly the same in case there was a headwind or a tailwind. But at the moment, subjectively, I don't really think there's much of a difference in it at all. I'll start the decibel meter and we'll see how we go. Therefore, to determine if the reduced sound level was actually from the door seals being changed or any changes in the road, perhaps the wind direction, I turned the car around and I drove the exact same 20-kilometer leg again in the same direction to ensure that we don't have any variance in wind noise or road surface texture if they did any road works. And I decided to log the sound for a longer distance to rule out any errors, as there was a lot more traffic on the road by that point in time, so I can get a better average, because the more readings you get, the better average you're going to get. This is the data from the verified factory run. After analyzing 900 data points, almost double the logging distance, 40 kilometers, just to be more accurate, the average noise level was 71.6 decibels. And if you're confused as much as I am, you're right, they are actually quieter than the aftermarket door seals. In the world of acoustics, where the decibels are logarithmic, this is a significant difference. Put it this way, for every 10 decibels you go up, the sound intensity multiplies by 10 times, and your ears hear it as twice as loud. So that small gap on the graph, it actually equates to 32% less sound hitting your eardrums. And to your brain when you're driving, that registers in the cabin as roughly being 9% quieter with the factory seals as opposed to the aftermarket seals. However, I know this isn't a lab test, and therefore, to reduce the room for error even more and to make sure that the sound logs are on the exact same parts of the exact same road, I ran the data through some very fancy computer programs that use a cross-correlation algorithm. This is essentially high-tech wizardry that looks at the fingerprints of the sound waves. It finds noticeable events like when the tires hit the same bridge expansion joints or road bumps on both recordings, and it accurately overlays them on top of each other to compare them better. By time aligning these two data sets, we're looking at the exact same patch of asphalt, so that way we can rule out road texture. And when I did that, it still didn't matter if the road was smooth or rough. The factory seals were still quieter in today's test. When you're trying to control sound levels, ideally you want to stop both the spikes and the drones, and whilst the overall averages are great, they don't tell the full story in this particular test. I ran the data through a statistical filter to remove any abnormalities like me slowing down, hitting a pothole, or the navigator telling me that there's a speed camera ahead, to find the true, consistent maximum and minimum sound levels. And the results in that case were even more extreme. Both the seals hit the exact same volume ceiling, roughly 77 decibels. So if a road train passes you, neither of the seals are going to save your eardrums from being hurt. But the difference was massive in the drone suppression. The aftermarket seals hit a sound floor level of 68.9 decibels and just couldn't go any lower after that point. They have a consistent baseline drone. The factory seals, however, dropped all the way to 65.5 decibels. And remember, this isn't the minimum reading, this is the sustained average minimum sound level. That is a 3.4 decibel difference in the sound floor. And to put that into perspective, on a smooth bit of road, the factory seals are mathematically half as loud to your eardrums as the upgraded door seals that I paid good money for. This explains why I immediately noticed the difference when I started driving the car. But you're probably wondering now, how is this possible? How can adding 10 millimeters of extra rubber result in more noise in the car? Based on the measurements and the fitment, I have three theories that I would like to share with you. The first theory is the shape. The aftermarket seals are generic. They rely on soft rubber squishing into place, and because they're not molded for the 70 series door shape, I believe that they're leaving gaps in the bends that allow air and noise back in. My second theory is the door alignment. Remember that extra 10 millimeters of thickness on the aftermarket door seals? When you close the door, the rubber is pushing the door back out from the body. So while you might have a tight seal where the door touches the rubber, the seal itself is pushing the door outwards, potentially creating bigger panel gaps that then let more sound in and create more sound. And you can easily and immediately feel this when you try to close the door with the aftermarket door seals in, because you really gotta slam it hard to close it. My third theory is the material. The factory rubber seals are stiffer and denser, and the aftermarket ones are very soft. So it is possible that the specific compound that Toyota uses in the factory door seals is better at absorbing road frequencies than the soft foam used in the aftermarket tubes. And I do have to admit that I am quite disappointed. The results surprised me because I was expecting this video to be about how much better the aftermarket door seals are and how much you're reducing the noise. But the results were quite the opposite, and they are accurate by both the meter and what I immediately observed before I even looked at the results. When I first installed these aftermarket seals 18 months ago, I thought they worked, and maybe they did work while they were new, but over time, potentially the rubber aged and changed, and right now they're performing worse than the factory seals. So I'm going to be leaving the factory seals in the car because they simply work better. And that also means that I wasted my money changing the seals and buying the aftermarket seals. Based on this test objectively and subjectively, this is my advice to you. If your panel gaps are tight and your car is relatively new like mine is, stick with the genuine door seals. They fit better and they don't push the door out of alignment. And the data does prove that they are considerably quieter. If your cruiser is old and the hinges are getting a little bit worn out and the door is loose and you have bigger gaps in between panels, maybe the thicker door seals will work better for you. I don't know. But in today's test, the Toyota engineers have clearly won the battle against the aftermarket. Guys, before we wrap it up, I do put a lot of work and cost into these tests. So if you have found it useful, please hit that like button for me to help the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to support me in making more videos like this, be sure to check out some of my Amazon links in the description below for the gear that I have bought with my own money that actually does work well. It doesn't cost you anything, but helps me recoup some of my costs. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.